The day I walked into Professor Alden's office, I never imagined it would set off a chain of events that would haunt me forever. I was desperate. Desperate for an A+. Desperate to maintain my scholarship. Desperate to prove to myself that I could survive this brutal semester. But desperation makes us do things we never thought we'd consider, doesn't it? Professor Alden was known for being tough, unyielding, and entirely unimpressed by flattery. He'd built a reputation on his no-nonsense demeanor and his sharp intellect. His students either revered him or feared him, and I wasn't sure where I fell. What I did know was that I needed his help, and fast. When I entered his office that day, I clutched a folder of incomplete assignments and a flimsy excuse about needing extra time. His piercing gaze made me falter, but I pressed on, explaining how life had gotten overwhelming, how I just needed a little understanding. He listened without interrupting, his face unreadable. "Miss Carter?" he finally said, his voice as smooth as polished stone. "Life doesn't get easier when you're out of college. It gets harder. If you can't manage your time now, how do you expect to manage a career?" His words stung, but they weren't wrong. Still, I couldn't give up. "I know, Professor," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I just need a chance." That's when I saw it. A flicker of something in his eyes, something that wasn't entirely professional. He leaned back in his chair, studying me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. "A chance, Miss Carter?" he repeated, his tone laced with something I couldn't quite place. In that moment, I realized what he was implying. My stomach churned, but a part of me, a dark, shameful part, considered it. What was the alternative? Failing the class, losing my scholarship, letting my family down? The stakes felt impossibly high, and I was drowning in the pressure. "What are you willing to do for this chance?" he asked, his voice low and deliberate. I froze. The room felt suddenly too small, the air too thick. My mind raced with 1,000 thoughts, none of them coherent. But instead of fleeing, instead of saying something to shut this down, I said the one thing I'd regret forever. "What do you want me to do?" His lips curved into a smile, not warm, not kind, but knowing. He stood and walked around the desk, his movements slow and deliberate. "I'm sure we can come to an arrangement," he said. What happened next was a blur of crossed lines and shattered boundaries. I'd like to say I was coerced, that I didn't have a choice. But the truth is, I made a choice. It wasn't an easy one, and it wasn't one I'm proud of. But it was mine. In the days that followed, I convinced myself it was a one-time thing, a necessary evil to secure my future. But life has a way of complicating things. Professor Alden didn't treat me any differently in class, but every time our eyes met, I felt the weight of our secret. It was suffocating. And then there were the rumors, whispers in the hallways, lingering glances from my classmates. I tried to ignore them, to tell myself they were baseless. But deep down, I knew the truth had a way of surfacing, no matter how carefully you tried to bury it. The breaking point came when I received my final grade, an A+. I should have felt relief, even triumph, but all I felt was hollow. The price I'd paid for that grade loomed over me, a constant reminder of my moral failure. Weeks turned into months, and I thought I'd left it all behind. But secrets have a way of festering, of demanding to be acknowledged. One day, I received an email from Professor Alden. He wanted to meet. My heart sank as I read his words. What more could he possibly want from me? When I arrived at his office, he seemed different. The confidence, the control, it was gone. He looked worried. "Miss Carter," he began, "I've made a mistake." I didn't know whether to feel relieved or angry. "A mistake?" I asked, my voice laced with disbelief. He sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "I've crossed a line, and I'll have to face the consequences. But you don't have to. If anyone asks, deny everything. Say I pressured you. Say whatever you need to protect yourself." His words stunned me. Was this guilt? Regret? Or was it self-preservation disguised as concern? I didn't know, and honestly, I didn't care. All I wanted was to put this chapter behind me. But life isn't that simple. The truth came out, as it always does. A classmate had overheard something, had seen something, and soon the administration was involved. There were meetings, investigations, accusations. I felt like a bug under a microscope, every detail of my life dissected and scrutinized. In the end, Professor Alden resigned. He took full responsibility, sparing me from the worst of the fallout. But the damage was done. My reputation was tarnished, my confidence shattered. I'd gotten the grade I wanted, but at what cost? Now, as I look back on that time, I realize the grade was never worth it. The desperation, the choices, the secrets, they've left scars that no amount of academic success can erase. If I could go back, I'd tell myself one thing. Some prices are too high to pay, no matter how desperate you are. And the real lesson? Integrity matters. Because when you compromise it, you don't just lose a part of yourself, you lose the chance to be proud of who you are.